All right, try again. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's February 20th, 2025. This is the Justice Project Oversight and Planning Committee meeting, and the meeting is officially called to order.
Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that brings us here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events.
Great, thank you. Yay, thank you, Tasha, and thank you, Hannah. That's awesome. I'm Holly O'Neill, and I'm going to be helping as the facilitator for today's meeting. A couple of reminders to keep your video on as much as possible, except whoever, Andrew Mitchell, that photo stays. That is an awesome photo. We're going to enjoy it the whole time. But otherwise, keep yourself muted except when speaking. Remember that these are open public meetings and they are recorded. When we're in a discussion mode, please use your raise hand button to be recognized to speak. Most of the time I can see if you raise your hand, but either one will work. It's helpful though. And when you're using acronyms, please define what they mean. I also wanted to mention a couple of just housekeeping things. First, that Doreen Hilaire-Vargas, our representative from the Lummi Nation, had to step down. Her schedule was too busy. So we'll be looking for a replacement for that seat. And is Parneet here? I didn't see them.
Not yet, anyway.
Okay, so at some point we do have our youth rep, but they haven't made it to a meeting yet. So hopefully they will soon. Okay, well, let's jump in. So we're going to be looking at the implementation plan quarterly progress report, which hopefully you all reviewed. And love to hear from everybody here of just what's jumping out at you as the major highlights. And then we'll be working the majority of our time today with Julia to start to lay that foundation of our performance measurement plan. So that's the heart of our session today. And then we'll close out with a review of kind of what we've been thinking about for our next meeting and some public comment. So let's jump in. So Marty, our action plan.
Okay. So as I said last meeting, each meeting will review the action plan, just like where we've been, where we are, and what's coming next. And the action plan, the full action plan, is in the meeting packet. And this is just to keep us oriented. So you can see at the top, that was our last meeting. We focused on jail and behavioral care center design. And at this meeting, rather than doing follow-up on that and the inmate focus groups and such, we are pushing that down to March because we are waiting for the owner's representative. They've been hired now, and we are waiting to really coordinate with the owner's representative and on what public engagement will look like. That said, we are going to be moving forward on the jail inmate focus groups using the input that you all gave on the questions and going ahead with the focus groups. So hopefully we'll have something to report on that at the next meeting. So here we are today. We're talking about monitoring progress and the evaluation and performance measurement plan. We'll continue working with Julia at the next meeting. Again, we hope to follow up on the jail inmate input, and also we'll see about the website. I'll show you a little bit about that in just a second. Oops, sorry. So Shall I just keep going on this?
Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on a
All
roll.
right. So I'm going to jump into the quarterly progress report summary. And before we talk about it, I just want to give you a little overview of what they are. The quarterly reports are that you've seen are based on larger reports that are put together by the executive's office, specifically Kayla Schott-Bressler, with input from all the different departments that are under the executive's office purview. And Kayla presents the full report to the IPRTF, Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. That's quarterly. Then we take it and we may need to gather a little additional information to create a summary report for public distribution. And these summary reports focus specifically on what is in process and what has happened since the last quarterly report. We are not looking ahead at what's being planned. We're not doing any forecasting, which is done in the full quarterly reports that the executive's office produces. So we are just moving along with each of these quarterly reports, just trying to capture, okay, what happened in this last quarter? Where are we now? Then council staff posts to the Justice Project website. And this is a new thing. And I want to share that with you in just a second. Then we all, the JPOP committee, identify highlights to share via social media and other ways. And that's what we're going to do today. That's where we are right now. And then all of you are encouraged to spread the word about what's on, about the fact that these progress reports exist, and to share any social media posts with your networks. So I would like to just show you the website. Are you all seeing it right now?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
So this web page is a refurbished version of the Justice Project website. We brought it up to date with the help of the council staff. Jenna Jernan has been fabulous in putting this this material up here, and I specifically it includes some parts that are more overview about the Justice Project, but I want to focus in here on progress underway. And this link, track Justice Project implementation plan progress. You can also get to the same place over here, IPRTF summaries of Justice Project implementation plan progress reports. They go to the same place. I'm going to click, and here we are on this page. And we've tried to make clear that what is posted here are summaries of the full reports. And I'm going to click on the quarterly report because I want to show you one other thing. So this is the quarterly report that was in your packet. It's talking about, it's what developed in the last quarter, which was the fourth quarter of 2024, October to December. The next quarterly report, just so you know, will be January, February, March, and that report we will get in April. All right, so if you scroll to the bottom of these reports, there's a link. Click here to read the full report. And I'm going to just do this so you can see what happens. You get to this full report that Kayla Schott-Bressler produced and the executive's office produced with all of the input, like I said, from the different departments. So if you want to dig deeper, you can. And if you want to see the forecasting, you can go here. All right. And now, let me just go back to our slides and just ask, does anybody have any questions about what these quarterly reports are? Okay. Or Tasha?
Yeah.
Not necessarily about the quarterly reports, but the website, because is there a way to like link a calendar for our monthly meetings for people who want to join? Because people are always like, well, how do I join? And then sometimes it's more difficult. Like I can eventually get them there, but I didn't know if there was a way to link these particular criminal justice project ones for like the steering committee specific. So just a thought.
Yeah, let me just, I can show you how to do that. Are you seeing my
We're senior screen.
what
Yeah.
I'm doing? Okay. What I did here is I went to the Justice Project Oversight and Planning Committee webpage. It's a different webpage than the Justice Project webpage. Confusing, I know. But every committee on every subcommittee of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force has its own page. And if you go right over here on the right side to agendas and meeting information, and you click there, you get to our calendar of meetings, and all the information about how to get on. I use this all the time, and I hope you do too, to access the agenda, the meeting packet, videos, the meeting summaries, and any extras, like we'll put all the slides up here. So this is a super handy page. I bookmarked this one for myself. So
Thank you.
any other questions? All right. Close these and hope you're seeing the slides again.
Yep. You're on the about quarterly reports. Yep.
And now we can just open it up for any thoughts about what jumps up to you as major highlights. And this is from the last quarterly report.
Yeah, the one that was in your packet. And again, just the purpose here is that we're trying to increase the visibility and transparency of what's going on in the Justice Project for our community. And so we're starting with you, right? Like making sure you're aware of it, that you can spread the word. And then today, just real briefly, can I see how many people actually got a chance to glance it through? Can you raise your hands? You saw it? Okay, so for those, if you haven't, now's a fine time to peek at it. But I'd love to hear just briefly from everybody, what did you notice? Like what caught your attention? It's like, oh, that's interesting. That's important. So how about if I just call on people and just make, what struck your attention? So Rob, I'm going to start with you. What struck your attention?
Really the evaluation and performance measurement plan. I think that really stood out to me as being important and kind of looking forward to the work around that.
Awesome. Great. Amber, how about you?
Yeah, I was looking at the strategies, so those kind of stuck out to me. Is that what we're looking at? I'm sorry. I have like all of them open right now.
Welcome to the club.
We'll be talking about those in just a second,
Okay.
Julia, but just like page back a couple of pages to the one that has quarterly report at the top, Justice Project quarterly report, and it's laid out kind of graphically on 3 pages.
Okay. Yeah, I just liked, I think we had talked about some of these previously. We were talking about the 15 different implementation plans. I feel like we talked about that last time. So yeah.
Yeah, so just being able to see the whole thing was an advantage. Like, oh, okay, here's the Justice Project. Right, there it is. Yeah, great. Trevor, how about for you? And you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I guess what stood out to me as particularly helpful is to kind of have that long range view, sort of like the bird's eye view. And because going through the whole thing, even my eyes started to glaze over a little bit. in terms of trying to take in all the information, especially trying to think about how it's all going to link together. So having the different summaries and having kind of laid out and mapped out, just from a visual standpoint, was helpful.
Cool. Thank you. Daniel?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was just taking a look at it. There's a couple of, I'm gonna go off script here a little bit.
Great.
Last Friday we had Deej Waldeek clinic come up at 2030 Division Street, and we probably had 100+ people at that ceremony to introduce their opiate use disorder treatment services. We have Rick Larson, representative, and mayor and county executive, sheriff, police chief, many elders from from tribes locally. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that that happened, and that's part of the whole plan for the Division Street property. So I just wanted to acknowledge that a bit. And then the other thing, and it's more of a question, and I don't want to appear, critical or anything, but I think there needs to be some lane definition, so to speak, when it comes to the difference between what the task force is doing and what JPOP is doing. And there's a bunch of overlap, and I serve on both. And I really think that in order, part of the thing that you were just talking about was, communicating out to the public, and that's great. Let's do that. But I think people are confused as to who's doing what. And I think just having that definition would be beneficial. That's really it.
The definition of the IPRTF and its subcommittees, and making
Well,
sure that that's clear.
yeah, I mean, so Stephen Gockley is on this call as well. He's the co-chair, and we've been tasked with reentry, providing some kind of reentry recommendations, and then what happens with Division Street. And I mean, with Division, I'm a city council member. I'm not a county council member. I've got no jurisdiction out there, but I've got influence and recommendations. It would just be helpful to understand just a little bit better as to what we're being asked to do. And I'm not saying on the task force part of it, we'll get that figured out with our co-chairs, but with the JPOP, what are the expectations? That's really it.
Great. Okay, well, let's hold that. We
Yeah.
did.
Can
go
I
ahead,
just
Patty.
try and say a couple of things in response?
Mhm.
Okay. I first of all, the social media vehicles for communicating out about implementation plan updates are IPRTF vehicles. Just so that'll be the organizational header for this stuff, just so that's clear. And the event that you just mentioned is fabulous, and I do hope that that is included in the next quarterly report, because that was a February event, right? So it'll be in the next quarter. The delay between when things happen and when a quarterly report comes out and then gets summarized and then we talk about it is like, it's almost 2 months. So that I think we can work on by when events happen, like the one you mentioned that we want to put out there. Can we use the IPRTF social media, but pick up and share other any posts that the city did about it, and make sure that's going out through social media ahead of time? And maybe we can even make a little area on this Justice Project webpage that has like the latest news, that I think that could be a good addition to this.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thanks, Marty. Okay, Stark, what jumped out at you as the major highlights from the quarterly report?
I don't know if it is necessarily a major highlight, but I noticed that beginning, I think, in March and each month subsequent to that, there is planned some sort of public engagement forum where people will have input into what the jail and the behavioral care center will look like. And I wasn't aware that that was going to happen, and I'm trying to envision what that might look like and where that's going to be and how we get the word out and so on and so forth. And so if anybody can speak to that, I think that would be of interest to me.
Great. Yeah, Marty, do you want to, looks like you want to.
All I can, I don't think there's a set plan yet. We just know that it should happen. But again, it's like, well, the owners rep organization, SVC, STV, I mean, has just come on board, and it needs to be done in coordination with that consultant group and the jail and behavioral care center design team and others. So it's a little squishy right now about the actual schedule, but we'll keep trying to get more clarity on it.
Yeah. I mean, in concept, we were talking about aiming for the spring, but that's all contingent on the owner's rep schedule and their contract. So, okay, Stephen, you're up. What highlights stood out to you?
Well, I'm not a formal member of the J-pop, and I really only skimmed it in the most cursory manner, so I'm not going to take up any time because I don't really have any highlights or comments to make on it.
Okay. I can't, I kind of compulsively call on you, Stephen, so I'll remember.
Hey, Holly, could I go real quick? I got a reporter going to call me in.
Oh, yeah, please do, Barry. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, number one, it's readability. I like most of it, except for the smallest text was a little small for me. But I think the organization and everything of the report itself and how you've kind of put it together, and it looks good. I like that we're starting to try to get our arms around some of those dates. Like you just said, that's going to be a very fluid effort, I think. But I think as long as we're on top of it, we can probably keep up with it. So I just wanted to jump in. Sorry, Holly. The Mittendorf from the Herald is going to call me in just a second. So
how timely and perfect, right? Like we're trying to get the word out. Power on, Barry. Power on, and thank you.
It's a different subject, but
still
okay,
important.
thanks.
All right. Okay, Hannah, how about for you? What jumped out at you?
Yeah, I have a couple things. The first one that jumped out to me was shout out to our pilot program and the new jail and behavioral health care center. And then also the expanding supportive housing programs. I think that's a really huge thing that people are concerned about in the community right now. So just seeing that there's an update and of things to come is really helpful to keep track of.
Cool, thank you. Pam, how about for you?
Okay, I've been racking my brain trying to think of the name of a funding source that I've heard's been applied for by some agencies in our area. But so number 12, talking about expanding supportive housing, and it says there's 7 million through the Disability Rights Washington, and I'm wondering, is there a name of that funding source, and does anybody have any direction to what that means? And I've also done like some searching based on questions that popped into my head, and I'm learning more about what's going on in our community. So yeah, it's a native name. I can't think of it. It's funding for supportive for the folks that are wrapped up in these unconstitutional competency evaluation. It's a certain funding that's supposed to help out with supportive housing for that population.
We talk about True Blood?
True Blood.
Yes, thank you. True Blood. Yeah. So I wondered if this 7 million is part of True Blood or something totally different. That's what I was wondering.
Great.
My understanding is that it is part of True Blood. Yeah.
Good. My brain worked well.
You did great.
Okay. Huh. Yeah. So I think the company that I work, Pioneer Human Services, is put in their bid for some of that. So I don't know. It's good that we've got some funding sources that we're looking into. And I think also maybe like for me, just doing some searches when I read something in here that I don't understand is helping me better understand the process.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and clicking into that full report by going to the bottom and using the link at the bottom of the report, you might find it in there. You might find the
Okay,
details
cool.
that you're
Yeah, I
looking
probably
for.
would have. Yeah, so I tried to get to that, but I didn't make it before the meeting, so I will get there.
Right. That's why we're working through the system. Good, thank you. Dean?
Like Steve, I'm not a member of this committee, so I'm not sure I should take up time. Let me just mention, I think it stood out to me is the fact that we don't have operational funding for the 23-hour crisis center.
Mhm.
And I think that's a huge challenge for us.
So noted. Thank you. Okay, Jason.
Hey, a lot of good stuff here. The thing that jumped out at me that, and maybe it's just because this topic has been so prominent in my work lately, but under number 9, the identify additional facilities, just want to give a shout out to the way station. That is such an awesome program and just such a monumental achievement to get that up and running. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to go check out that facility, I highly recommend it. That being said, that what good work they're doing there, it just also highlights the need we have for further programming of that type, specifically places for people to access during the daytime. I volunteer at the severe weather shelter, and in the mornings they just have a van going back and forth shuttling people over to the way station, because it's one of very few places for people to go when it's cold outside. So I know they're doing a pretty heavy lift right now to try to accommodate more people than they were probably set up for. I also work closely with the library, and they are just underwater right now, struggling with capacity issues and staff training issue or lack thereof, not being, you know, they didn't set out to be social workers in their careers, and yet that's the job that we're expecting them to do. And they're really struggling right now too. And a lot of our conversations and talk is about overnight shelter, which is absolutely a priority. But I think in those conversations, with that being such a high need, daytime locations for people to hang out can be skipped over sometimes. So I just want to acknowledge that the way station is a great program. So grateful for it. We need more stuff like that, more places for people to be during the day. And I just don't want us to overlook that need moving forward. Not that we have, or we might not, but I just feel like there's not enough advocacy for that. And so I just want to be that voice for the library. And again, I just met with Rebecca, the director of the library, yesterday, and so this is very fresh for me. So I'm speaking out on Rebecca's behalf right now for that, just calling out for some daytime, day center type activities and programs in the future.
Yeah, here. Thank you. Mary Lou, are you there? I can see your windows. Okay, I'll come back to you. Andrew, how about for you? Okay, you might be in that sunset. Sun Paul, are you there? Okay, so thank you, everybody. It's really making me think about like the stories that we're telling to our community. How do we capture those? How do we, Dan, I was so glad you mentioned the event that you just described and what's happening at the library and the importance of the way station, all these things, and how we're just keeping the community informed about what we're doing and what is happening and what the issues are. So I think we're just taking baby steps to dial that in. And now we're going to look at our evaluation plan, because ultimately it's not just the stories about what's happening on the ground, but it's also the indicators about how we're making progress, as we committed to for the community with this justice project. So I'm going to turn it over to Julia, and we're going to get started. Finally, you guys, we've been waiting for this for how long? This is like, yay, we're finally here. Our first real meeting with Julia.
And
Okay.
while Julia's getting her slides up, I just was realizing that I neglected to give credit to Emily Keeler from Chucknut Health Foundation for doing the graphic layout of the year 1 report and this quarterly report that we've just looked at. So thank you to Emily. Okay, Julia, you got it.
Awesome. I'm assuming that means you can see my screen. So I will go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I've interacted with a handful of you multiple times. I've been on the J-pop calls before, but as Holly was just saying, this is kind of the real first time that we're digging into content together. So just as a reminder, my name is Julia Garrett. I work with Village Reach, and we are contracted to support the performance measurement plan. And today we're talking about what does success look like? And there we go. And just kind of zooming us out, big picture, where are we in the grand scheme of things? So, there was the needs assessment that was done a couple of years ago, which then informed the implementation plan. And now we're in this space where we want to be able to evaluate the performance and measure the performance of the implementation plan. And then from there, that would inform a data dashboard that could actually reflect and share performance and impact measures for key stakeholders and decision makers, as well as the community or public at large. And this is all happening, at the same time that there's actual ongoing implementation of the 15 projects. So there's a lot happening all at once, but we are in this middle stage here with developing the plan to evaluate and measure the implementation plan's performance and impact. And so at a very high level, I just wanted to kind of ground us in when we're talking about a performance measurement plan, what are we actually talking about? What goes into that? And there are three main things that for this one specifically, we are going to be focusing on. The first being kind of goals and outcomes, which is what we're talking about today. So definitions of success. And we're looking at that at the project level, the strategy level, and then also at the implementation plan as a whole. And then within kind of goals and outcomes, we want to figure out, okay, how do we measure that? How do we measure if we're successful? So that then gets into performance metrics, once again, for each project, strategy, and then also the implementation plan as a whole. And that will include metrics that will include the definition, calculation, is there any level of disaggregation we want to do? How frequently would it be updated? Who would be responsible for that? And then that ties into the data element. As many of you, if not all of you on the call are very aware, there's many different data sources. Some talk to each other, some don't. And there's a lot of sorting through that needs to be done in terms of kind of making sense of all of those, how they talk to each other, and specifically which data sources map to which metrics, and or identifying gaps where maybe, hey, this would be really important for us to be able to measure the performance, but we don't currently have a way to measure it. So those are the three kind of key buckets: the goals and outcomes, the measures, and the data that will make up the evaluation and performance measurement plan. And so as I mentioned in the previous slide, we would be talking about, the goals and outcomes. And so in the process of developing a performance measurement plan, we really want to start with the ends before we can get to the means. And what I mean by that is being really clear on what we want to get to, what's the outcome, what's the goal, before we can decide, okay, now how are we going to measure that? So it can feel kind of like a backwards approach, but that's actually quite common when developing evaluation and performance measurement plans. And so that's why we're starting, the conversation today with the J-pop around what does success look like for the different strategies. And as I mentioned, we're going to also include what it looks like at the implementation plan level as a whole and the 15 projects. Now, what this graphic here is showing is, the different levels that we will be defining success at, and the key people or committees that are involved for each level. So currently, we are having conversations with what does success look like at the implementation plan level with committee leads, so co-chairs of IPRTF, Index, J-pop. For what does success look like at the strategy level, that is what this conversation today is really going to be focused on. So with the J-pop. And then for each of the 15 projects, I am meeting with key stakeholders and project leads to hear from them, what does success look like for them in that project? And so as I said, we're starting today with you all, and we're going to go through the 5 implementation plan strategies. And, if you got a chance to look at the packet beforehand, great. If not, we will go through them. And each strategy has about 4 to 6 statements describing success that we really want to look at and discuss with you today, and kind of get an understanding from you all if these statements of success still resonate for you. Do they make sense to you in the work that you do? Is there anything that would make them better? And why I ask, do these statements of success still resonate? It's because the statements of success are pulled from the implementation plan and the goals that were tied to each strategy in the implementation plan. However, the implementation plan was created, a couple of years ago. And as we all know, like day to day, everything is changing. The reality of what things look like is changing, what's possible, what's feasible. And so I want to ensure that, do those things that were goals and outcomes a few years ago still resonate today? And if not, how can we update them? How can we make them more relevant? And just to provide one more kind of scene setting slide here, when we talk about goals, how they were talked about in the implementation plan, which also then ties to the needs assessment, is at the systems level, the services level, and facilities level. And so just wanting to kind of get us all on the same page, using the same language for this call. When we're talking about systems, we're talking about practices, policies, and funding to ensure that a system has sufficient capacity, is fair, functions efficiently, and reduces incarceration and the duration of incarceration. When we're talking about services, that's looking at the types of support that need to be in place for people to prevent and reduce involvement with the criminal legal system. And then when we're talking about facilities, that's both the jail as well as a variety of residential and non-residential facilities and settings for legal and treatment services. So with that, I will go ahead and segue us into looking at the definitions of success as we have them for each strategy. And we will spend about 10 minutes, given the time that we have for today, to reflect upon and share out any comments that people may have for each strategy. And so I just want to kind of give that that parameter, an expectation around kind of the level of conversation we'll be able to have. And so starting with strategy 1, which is ensuring oversight, accountability, and transparency, I am actually going to put this one on pause until the end. As strategy itself says, it's really focused on oversight, accountability, and transparency, and not as much about the actual programmatic work that's happening. And that's the other kind of 4 strategies. And those are the ones I really want to make sure we get to today. And if we do end up running out of time, those are the top 4 we're prioritizing. And if we don't, then we will also get to strategy 1. So we may circle back to this, but for now, I'm going to get us started with strategy 2. And I'm going to just kind of read through what is on the slide, in case anyone didn't get a chance to sit with this beforehand, so that we're all kind of getting up to speed. And then I will open the floor for people's comments on if they feel these definitions capture what success looks like at the strategy level, in their opinion and in the work that they do. So for strategy 2, the 3 implementation plan projects are addressing workforce shortages in behavioral health services. It's building systems to facilitate communication and coordination between different organizations. And it's also increasing the capacity of effective existing programs to divert people from incarceration. And so when we talk about success for strategy 2, how it's been defined is at both the systems level and the services level. So at the systems level, success would be low risk offenders are safely and effectively diverted, from Whatcom County jail sentence and provided support to help them succeed. And it also is sufficient funding, staffing, and resources that thus ensure adequate service capacity at all points of contact in the criminal legal system. Then when we're talking about the services level, success looks like coordinated services and programs effectively close the gaps between community, legal, and jail-based services at all points of contact in the criminal legal system. It also looks like people who are released from jail have immediate access to behavioral health and medical care, housing, employment, and support systems to avoid reincarceration. And then finally, it also looks like community and jail-based services support healing and make measurable differences in reducing crimes of poverty and repeat offenses. So I would like to open the floor to all of you on J-POP and hear from you if this definition of success at the systems and or services level still resonates for you. Is there anything you would want to change or add? Anything that's not sitting right? So, and Marty will call on people if they raise their hands, since I don't have good visibility into that.
This is Andrew with the Bellingham Municipal Court. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties with my cell phone, but these all seem like they're right on point with what we're aiming for. So I wouldn't make too many changes. That's what the community court's trying to achieve currently.
Great. That is also good input if they all look good. So thank you.
Stark?
Yeah. Oh, shoot.
You're okay.
Yeah. Just one comment as to the language there involving effectively diverted from Whatcom County jail sentence. We in the Public Defender's Office have been advocating and will continue to advocate that diversion not be simply from a jail sentence, but actually from the criminal justice system at the outset, so that those numbers do not go to the prosecutor's office. They don't come to our office. They don't go to court. When Whatcom County brought LEAD into being, there was decisions made to not have it be an arrest-based diversion, and as a result, it hasn't had the impact that it could have had on the criminal justice system. So I think that language, and perhaps it's not even intentional language, that restricts diversions to jail sentence diversions, needs to be expanded considerably to solve a number of other problems.
Great, thank you. That's super helpful. I've noted that down.
Tasha?
Well, just on the number 4 to address workplace or workforce shortages, when I'm reading the success, I'm not seeing any systems or service levels that kind of speaks to, it says sufficient funding and staffing, but how do you, my understanding is just not enough people are in it. So I just feel like that's, it's two separate things versus like one systems and services is dealing with the community that we're serving, and then the workforce shortages is more of a facility. I don't know. They're not necessarily facilities, but they're more like the people needed to make this happen. So it just seemed different. It wasn't coalescing for me there.
Okay.
Dean, you are next.
Just to follow on what Stark had to say in that first bullet under systems level, I think there needs to be a distinction between pre and post conviction. It's not just people sentenced, it's people who are incarcerated awaiting trial, as well as those folks that Stark mentioned who shouldn't even be entering the criminal justice system itself because of their behavioral disorders.
Thank you, Dean.
Hannah.
Yeah, I'm kind of going off of what Tasha said. Points 4 and 5 seem a little bit minor in these success points to me. I think they touch on them in a couple of the bullet points, but it's not as expansive as point 6 is, which could be intentional and necessary, but I think number 5, especially like the communication, the coordination between organizations is a really big gap right now. So having different measures of success in there that are specifically targeted towards how we coordinate with each other and not just how it impacts the client served, because it ultimately will impact a client served, but we need to focus on the coordination on the front end first.
Excellent. Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to provide a little bit of like just a data point real quick. So Behavioral Health Committee has 2 members that are associated. One is an SUDP professional who runs a program at Whatcom Community College. So it's a substance use disorder certificated program. And then we have another person that works in a human services capacity at the same college. And so there are resources out there. What we're seeing is a workforce shortage when it comes to people entering those programs. And sometimes when folks go through that program or those programs, they end up leaving the community because they can't afford to live here due to housing costs. And I think that's one thing. And then the housing costs for folks that are re-entering from jail or DOC, it's a problem. We don't have our vacancy rate right now is very low, and we're just having issues when it comes to getting housing for the general population, let alone folks who may have a felony conviction or God forbid an arson or something worse than that. So I just want to put that out there that this is a challenge and we need to address it. These are lofty goals. I definitely support them. But I just want us to have a reality check when it comes to how things are out on the ground out there. So
Thank you. Amber.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like this has already kind of been shared, but the bullet point, the immediate access, like there's so much behavioral health, medical, housing, employment. Those are big needs, and that word immediate feels like out of control right now. I don't know, like that just seems like there's so many variables with it. Additionally, and I think this is probably covered in the first bullet point, but I think people who are also, maybe they didn't go to jail, deserve immediate access to those things as well, if that's what we're trying to go for. But yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Great, super helpful. So we have just about a minute left, Julia.
Okay.
And I see we just had someone from the Public Defender's Office enter too. So any other comments, you guys? Oh, there's Tasha. Go ahead, Tasha.
Just to follow up on the sufficient funding, staffing, and resources, I think as kind of what Hannah brought up, maybe think to number 5. What is identifying sufficient funding? Is it just, as just brought up by Amber, to all people in the community, or just criminal justice involved people in the community? I mean, there's a whole bunch of data, and we all acknowledge we need data, but that's what kind of goes with that.
Thanks. And we have Trevor, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I just found myself kind of wondering, especially looking at systems levels and how the systems interact with the population that we're looking to serve. Determining what system identifies somebody as low risk versus medium or high risk, and how does that impact access to different programs and how those programs are built. Because it seems like that evaluation process would have a big impact on who is available to access those services once they're built and who's not. And then what happens to all those folks? So it's more of kind of a curiosity than anything, but it just stood out to me.
Okay. Okay, what do you guys think? Julia, should we keep moving?
Yeah, I think so, just because I want to make sure we're able to get good content in each. And, you know, please feel free if there's something that you think of afterwards. You know, you can reach out to myself, Holly, Marty, and, you know, my door, relatively speaking, is still open. If something comes to you later, as I know sometimes thinking on the spot, you miss things that you end up wanting to say. So, but yes, let's go ahead and go to strategy 3. What I will say is to some of the points that folks brought up, you know, some of the more nitty gritty will get defined through measures at the project level. And then kind of aggregated up into these larger definitions of success. So those points are also helpful as I'm having conversations with kind of project leads and key stakeholders to ensure that those details that you're bringing up and pointing out are reflected. So thank you. Strategy 3. So this is focusing on facilities. So building facilities needed to promote public health, safety, and justice. The 3 implementation plan projects that fall under those are the 23-hour crisis relief center, the new jail and behavioral health treatment center, and then also identifying what additional facilities are needed to support people with behavioral health and substance use disorder issues who are at risk of incarceration. So this strategy has definitions of success at all 3 of the different levels. So, and you'll see some of these have repeated language. The goals, you know, are applicable across different strategies. So we're seeing here systems level. It's one of the same goals from the prior one. Low risk offenders are safely and effectively diverted from a Whatcom County jail sentence and provided with support to help them succeed. Services level is coordinated services and programs effectively close the gaps between community, legal, and jail-based services at all points of contact in the criminal legal system. And then facility level, given that this strategy is focused on a lot of facilities, we have quite a few definitions of success here. So one being facilities are designed and operated to meet the health, safety, and welfare needs of those incarcerated and the people who work and visit there. Another way that we're defining success is facilities are designed to be versatile to adapt to changing needs. A third way is that incarceration facilities balance compassion with accountability to promote safety, health, rehabilitation, and recovery. And then the fourth way is facilities adequately serve the whole county, including cities and tribal jurisdictions. And since both the systems level and the services level goal, we've kind of talked about some of the language there in the previous strategy. If there are comments you have that, you know, are different than the language changes, please share those. But if not, I think the most valuable area would be to really focus on those facility level definitions of success or anything you think is missing for systems and services level. So I will open the floor to you all.
Pamela?
Okay, kind of out of my expertise here, but the last comment there, facilities adequately serving the whole county, including, okay, never mind. I didn't think county was mentioned, but it is just at the forefront. Okay, wanted to make sure county was in there, and it is.
All right, we're good?
Yep, good.
Excellent. Dan?
Yeah, so this keeps coming up in these slides where it says Whatcom County jail sentence, and Stark brought this up. Most of the people that are in the jail are there pre-sentencing, and they don't have a sentence. They've been charged, but they've not been convicted. And so I think that we need to really look at the how we're defining this. And then the other, I'm just looking at the 7, 8, and 9 here. One thing that that's one thing, and then the other is that City of Bellingham is producing a community court, which will be online here hopefully within the next month or two, that will provide what's called prosecutorial diversion programs, or PDPs, to basically divert people away into, you know, potentially the 23-hour crisis center, or perhaps the behavioral health treatment center, So I think we need to maybe think about those things in context because we're not talking about them. And I think that we need to introduce those components into our dialogue.
Great. Thank you. And I think, yeah, I foresee those coming up kind of at maybe the project level, wanting to capture those specific things and like programs or elements that you're mentioning in terms of, what did we do and how well did we do it. That's currently how I'm seeing that. But if you think there's a way that you envision it being incorporated at this like definition of success, I would love to hear your input on kind of what level do you foresee that fitting in? Yeah.
Rob?
I was just wondering, as Dean had mentioned a little bit, it sounds like the 23-hour program is sort of an unknown at this moment. And so I was just wondering if that's something that we're thinking about as we design these strategies, and do we need to address any of that?
So like impacts of funding impacts will come up throughout probably and there've been several other kind of like factors that affect the ability to achieve success. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Great.
Yes, this is all sitting right in the assumption that we have the funding to do this. Well, if we don't, right, that does change the reality. And so, Dean and I have started having conversations about how we reflect that, because it very much so is a reality that funding might not be there for some of these things. And that will obviously impact the quote unquote success of the implementation.
Hannah?
Yeah, I think the first point under the facility level is really great. I think it's missing the people who are, need to be diverted away from the jail or the criminal justice system. And it seems very heavily focused on just the incarceration and the jail facilities. But, like the crisis relief center, we want to be able to say the same thing for that facility or any others that we build. But otherwise, I think that's great.
Great, thank you.
Amber?
One thing that was just sort of coming up, thinking about the people who visit there. A lot of times people who are visiting, maybe the incarcerated individuals, they also would benefit from a lot of these programs. So having that access and information available, because I realize it's just like Hannah said, that it's not focused on the diverted individuals, but also just sort of access to resources for the other people who are visiting or associated with the incarcerated individuals. I don't know.
Great, thank you.
Dan, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to address that real quick. While we're kind of on topic here, I think it's really important that we consider the importance and value of 2030 Division Street when it comes to a behavioral health campus. When we're talking about facilities here, Digwalich, like I said, came out on Friday and had a ceremony. There's been a discussion about converting the work center there when that gets moved to La Bounty into potentially a clinic that could provide free or reduced cost services to not just people that are justice involved, but to their families. And so there's not been a lot of dialogue in this room when it comes to the relationship between Division Street potential and La Bounty for the new jail facility. And I just think that we can't miss the boat on this one. We've got to really think about if we're getting serious about behavioral health care, that's a place where that can happen. We've already got Ann Deacon Center there, and then Digwalich, and then there's other programs that are there as well. But I think that we've got to talk about that and figure out integrating that into the discussion here at some point. Maybe not today, but at some point. Thanks.
That's great. So that second bullet under facilities are designed to be versatile, to adapt to changing needs. Sounds like what you want to strive for. So there, constantly able to change and meet these new needs along the way. Cool. Okay, we got that. Hannah.
I just wanted to add to what Amber and then Dan said. I think it's really important to have like a community resource center. I know that's been talked about in the past, and that's what they have in Columbus. And because we have a lot of people that will show up to either to the jail or they'll show up to Lifeline Connections because they know somebody who is in the jail reentry program and they just want support, but they're not currently incarcerated, so we can't provide that support, but they're showing up and asking for help, but we just have to turn them away. And I think it'd be really awesome to have anybody like a mental health provider or a peer specialist to be able to answer those questions and support people if they come up and they're not necessarily they don't fit the criteria of certain programs. So it's a great point.
Anybody else? I'm not seeing any hands. Julie, did you have any comments or do you want to move on to the next one?
I think, a big takeaway from what I'm hearing, at least on this one and on the first one, is that some of the language might be too restrictive when we're talking about the specific communities that we are looking to see success in. And so that's definitely noted and is really helpful, and we'll work on new language. So for strategy 4, we are looking at expanding the capacity of programs to reduce incarceration or reincarceration. And so the implementation plan projects that fall under that are ensuring that people leaving detention and treatment facilities have transportation to a safe destination. It also includes bolstering reentry support services and maintaining and expanding supportive housing programs. And so as this strategy is focused on programs, as it stands, the current definition of success is really just looking at the services level. And at the services level, we're currently defining success as coordinated services and programs effectively close the gaps between community, legal, and jail-based services at all points of contact in the criminal legal system. We're also defining it as people released from jail have immediate access, with the note from earlier on the term immediate, access to behavioral health and medical care, housing, employment, and support systems to avoid reincarceration. And then community and jail-based services support healing and make measurable differences in reducing crimes of poverty and repeat offenses. So I will open the floor to you all for any comments.
Pamela?
Okay, again, with the immediate access, I'm wondering if there's not some verbiage that can't be more encompassing, as in research or looking for those resources should begin while they're actually incarcerated, not, immediate access to stuff on their way out the door it's just an interesting way to state it, because I think in my experience, finding resources should start day one of incarcerated, not on the day you're leaving the jail. I don't know if there's another way to say that.
Yeah, and that is reflected when we, in terms of some of the elements at the project level that we will hopefully be capturing. But when sitting with kind of the term immediate and thinking through some new wording, I'll consider that piece as well. How do we kind of maybe add an element that captures that to this definition?
And if things are looking, sorry, go ahead, Pamela.
Sorry, it just seems like it sets us kind of up for failure to say that we're going to immediately place them in different, to shoot for that. Like maybe there's just a more realistic way to state that.
And I was just going to say, if things are looking repetitive, it's because they are. It's because these different ways of defining success repeated and certain, throughout the 15 projects if you look at the needs assessment and implementation plan, you'll see that. So that's why it sounds a little like why these things come up, like the word immediate. Again, it's the same statement. Okay, Hannah.
Yeah, I think what Pam is speaking to is there's kind of two sides of things where we can't really do much when they're incarcerated right now, but we definitely should be able to. And that is what we should be striving for, is to set them up with a plan before they're ever released. But then also we can't do that right now. So expanding the services and support that we have upon release is also beneficial right now until we can kind of fix the systems that we have. But like, yeah, we can't get people onto the housing pool while they're incarcerated, and we can't get them set up with anything until they walk out the door. So how can we expand on that, but then also have realistic expectations for what we can do right now?
Holly, did you want to jump in with a?
Yeah, I'm just remembering the first time that Amber brought up that comment of immediate was unrealistic. And then when Pam pointed out about like I remember this conversation now that we had, way back, which was you did from the minute that someone is incarcerated, you would need to begin planning their exit so that when they left, it was an immediate, there was a seamless, transition to services. So I think that's why that term immediate got put in there, was the inference or the belief and the understanding really that the planning had to begin right away. So I don't know how to get around it in terms of this, because it jumps out in a different way, but somehow we have to reconnect the logic of how we came to that point.
Stark?
Yeah, under number 10 there, ensuring people leaving detention and treatment facilities have transportation to a safe destination. I kind of wanted to revisit what Chief Erickson described to us, I think, at the last meeting that we saw in Columbus, which was literally there was a facility attached to the jail that people had to pass through in order to be released from the facility. And within that very large space, there were not just tables and chairs, but coffee and cookies and things like that, where somebody could wait for a ride to be warm and be warm while they're waiting for a ride, and have people there staffing the facility 24/7 to be in a position to offer services to people who may not have come to anyone's attention until they were actually walking out the door. And reentry, I think, is a really important concept, and I'm glad to hear all of you, talking about it and dealing with it. But there's a point where you can get to literally everybody that leaves the jail, and that's through this port that we saw in Columbus. That I think for those of us that went to Columbus, that was probably the highlight of the jail, was this portal that people had to pass through as they left. And there's no reason that could not somehow be incorporated into a portal for leaving a behavioral health center as well. So transportation is great, but it would be great to have a facility there to really provide services to people on their way out the door.
Yeah. Fantastic. Pamela, you had another thought?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in regards to measuring success, does it make more sense to, what percentage of people are currently getting placed or getting any particular service, to let's get to where we're placing a larger percentage over time, instead of setting ourselves up to say we're doing this 100% from 0 to 100. It's like, can we do some intermediate goals to getting and improving ourselves progressively? But maybe that's not the way this works. I don't know.
No, definitely. We can set some targets and things that we're aiming for, right? Setting yourself up to do 100%, you're always going to fall short. Is typically, when setting targets, Usually that's not the goal. Usually, you'll go a little bit below that because it's so hard to reach every single person and do it every single time. So we will, and when we're looking at measures, one of the things, once I'll pull together some draft measures and want to get all of your input on them. One of the things we can discuss is around targets. And so what does that mean? So we can make more tangible that idea of success. So definitely.
Great. And before we move on, I just want to welcome Miriam. Thanks for joining us, Miriam. Glad you could be here. And we're kind of in process on conversation about the strategies and what success looks like. So we're on strategy 4 right now, and we're just looking over on the right-hand column what success looks like for the 3 projects on the left side. And Tasha, did you want to say something? You just disappeared. Okay, I'm gonna just guess that you had to attend to something, but we'll come back to you. And Dean.
Yeah, in relation to the first bullet under services level, where it talks about all points of contact in the criminal legal system, recalling that the needs assessment in part was built upon the sequential intercept model and as sort of the notion of the various points at which people have contact with that system and can be in fact intercepted and diverted from it. And so I'm just wondering if we might think about using the language of the sequential intercept model somehow in measuring success, particularly looking at the sort of what's the baseline of among people who are interacting with the legal system in terms of proportions of people who move on through the process as opposed to being intercepted and diverted, and looking at changes in those proportions and percentages as we move forward in the implementation of these various programs and projects.
Yeah. Thanks, Dean. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the sequential intercept model, I think this will come up in conversation repeatedly. So the best place to get familiar with it is probably to go to the needs assessment report. And also just ask me on the side too, or Holly, and we can give you a little background on that. And Dan, I'm just going to skip you for a second to Tasha because you were technically next, Tasha.
Yeah, thank you. To the third point on the services, the measurable differences, of course, I think, we've been talking a lot about data and how to truly measure. And, as I've talked to a couple different people, and I don't know if this is further in the discussion later, and this is just the broad overview, but, really having people that won't engage with services as a control group versus those that are engaging with services to see if these services are in fact having an impact on recidivism or reduction of incarceration. And that seemed like a very broad statement without like true metrics on measuring it. So
yeah, just to note, actually getting into, how do we define the measure and what that looks like and what that takes will be a follow-on to this. But yeah, really trying to get into what does a measurable difference mean and how are we going to capture that.
Great. And we're just about at time here, Julia. So we have like 1 more minute on this one. Nope.
Okay. How about Dan?
Yep. And then
I'll be quick. So I 100% agree with what Dean just said about the sequential intercept model. That model has what we have some of, but we need more of, and what we don't have. And so overlaying that with what we have here would be, I think, certainly helpful in terms of like an assessment of current like community inventory for the things that are pursuant and germane to what we're speaking of. And then the other thing that I don't see within this, I know we're kind of flying at like 30,000 feet here, but we have a social safety net when it comes to the nonprofit communities that are here providing excellent services, and having some mention of that, I think would be helpful, or at least pointing towards that would benefit this kind of high level view. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, for sake of time, we will move on to strategy 5. There we go. Which is making systems changes with local, regional, state, and federal partners. So the 3 implementation plan projects that fall under this are continue to make changes in court systems, which that's quite broad. And there is a more in-depth definition of that in the implementation plan itself. And then expediting access to competency restoration services, and then advocating for a state waiver to allow use of Medicaid funds. And as in the strategy title points out, this is looking at the systems changes. So all of our definitions of success are at the systems level. So we're defining success currently as policies are identified and changed to strategically address system gaps and achieve intended outcomes, such as reducing the jail population. It's also defined as low-risk offenders are safely and effectively diverted from Whatcom County jail sentence, which we've noted we're going to work on the language there to be broader, and provided with support to help them succeed. Third, people are assured speedy and fair resolution of legal issues to reduce unnecessarily long jail stays and hassle and restoration. And then finally, sufficient funding, staffing, and resources ensure adequate service capacity at all points of contact in the criminal legal system. So I will turn the floor over to you all for any comments, changes, additions.
Tasha?
On the systems level, are somewhere in there, as I know this is one of our last slides. We're so focused on reducing the jail population, and making sure that people that are interacting with the system, but I haven't seen, or maybe it hasn't really been highlighted, how is the general population feeling safe? Are we measuring the difference between how much access is it achieving a community as a whole feeling safer from these things? And then also on the last one, sufficient funding, staffing, resources. I mean, that's a huge broad ask, because even from just the police level, where we are the lowest number of police officers per capita in the United States, in Washington State, and then of course the defense attorneys, the potential to have to do the reduction of their caseload, and then all the other behavioral health. So and then kind of brings up the more third thing, the more services we offer, how do we balance it for people coming here to access services that aren't from our community? Because the more services you provide sometimes draws people from not outside our community, and then that requires us to continue to add to sufficient funding, staffing, because of all the stuff we're offering. More people come to the community to access those services, creating more and more need all the time. So.
Great, thank you, Tasha.
Anyone else want to comment on these definitions of success? Anna?
I wonder if we can expand on the speedy and fair resolution of legal issues, so that it's not just related to jail stays and restoration, but like quashing warrants and stuff like that complicates people's legal status and makes it more difficult for them to resolve any outstanding legal concerns and then get released in a timely manner. Yeah.
What do you think, Dan?
I'm just looking at the title of this one. When it comes to system changes with like state folks, for example. So I think it's important to understand that the county, the city, and the port have all gone their separate ways when it comes to hiring different lobbying groups to lobby for their own needs at the state level. And so when it comes to public safety priorities or police priorities, there's just different perspectives when it comes to what the county wants to do and what the city wants to do, but we're all kind of in it together. So I think that trying to figure that piece out is important. And then I just wanted to speak to what Tasha was saying when it comes to we don't talk about victim rights ever when it comes to not on the task force certainly, and not here. So I think that the public safety part of it needs to be part of the discussion when it comes to keeping the community safe. I think that that was a really good point that typically does not come up in this room. Thanks.
Yeah, and
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say just a quick note on that. So community or like population, in this case Whatcom, like safety is at the kind of macro level. So when you look at all the different ways that or all the different levels here, right? We have the projects which feed into the strategies, which feeds into the implementation plan. And then that implementation plan, right, sits within Whatcom County. And so when we're talking about the population level, there are going to be ways that we measure populations, like perceptions and feelings of safety, and thinking through metrics around that. So, so that is included at a more macro level, and we just aren't talking about it here. But it sounds like there are some folks on the call that would be great to pull in and review some of those metrics around population safety.
Great, and I'm sure that'll come back to this group in future conversations as the whole plan is taking shape. We'll get to see how all these things nest together. All right, Trevor.
Yeah, I apologize in advance if this is somewhere else and I missed it, but the point that says advocate for a state waiver to allow use of Medicaid funds, as related to on the systems level, wondering like how that correlates, or sort of like at what point in the system would Medicaid funds be utilized and for whom, and kind of like where does that fit in?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or does anybody want to take a moment, Dean, or anybody else, to talk about the Medicaid reentry waiver? Yeah, Dean.
So I think what that's referring to really is the ability to use Medicaid funds for services while people are incarcerated in the jail. You know, there is a change in the works. It's in process at the state level, I think. So maybe the measure is, to what extent is that being implemented at the state level, such as that we can, you know, use it effectively to bring services into the jail.
And also the sheriff's office and juvenile courts received money to participate in the in a state trial of having Medicaid offered to people in the jail, so that or people in the jail don't lose their Medicaid funding if they're eligible, so that they can have a seamless transition of services. And somebody else is probably going to be able to talk about this better than I just did, but it's for seamless transition of services paid for by Medicaid from jail to community. And that wasn't possible. That isn't possible now, but should be possible with this new program. Does anybody want to add to or clarify what I just said? Okay, well, we're tracking it in the quarterly reports. So stay tuned. The executive's office is definitely on this. The sheriff's office and juvenile courts are on this and trying to get everything in place for this new kind of transitional system with Medicaid. Did you have more thoughts about that, Trevor, or anything else you want to add? Okay.
Question about it, and I was just curious, is it currently, it's my understanding that Medicaid is good for 90 days while they are incarcerated. That's the current laws around that. If anybody, I'm just curious because I know that I go into juvie and the youth are good for up to 90 days. So I was just wondering if anybody else had any insight on that.
That's what I saw also. Hannah, do you have more?
Yeah, so the juveniles actually are good for a long time. I don't think theirs will ever turn off. For the adults, it depends on who their MCO is and if it gets caught. But technically it is suspended like right away, but 90 days for sure it's suspended, and then after a year in custody, then it's completely taken away and they have to reapply. Yeah, so this Medicaid waiver can't come soon enough, so that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Anything else? We have about 1 more minute.
And Holly, in terms of time, I have a next step slide, but do we have time to go back to strategy 1, or shall we do? Okay.
Yeah, just barely.
We will go back. So going back to strategy 1, as mentioned, this is really focused on ensuring oversight, accountability, and transparency. And the implementation plan projects were establishing JPOP committee, establishing a justice project finance advisory board, and then collecting data to measure progress toward desired outcomes and develop a data deck. And this one was not tied directly to any goals from the needs assessment, but instead more to values, which are reflected here. So this is all new wording. It's not duplicative of any of the ones that we saw in the other strategies. And so what we have defined as success thus far is practicing wise stewardship of public resources by using evidence-based decision-making, consistently gathering reliable data from across the criminal legal system to monitor and evaluate system performance. It's facilitating public engagement and transparent decision-making processes that reflect community priorities. It's ensuring systems, services, and facilities are adaptable to changing circumstances and needs, and then openly and actively addressing inequities and discrimination. So I would love if folks have any thoughts on this, and any changes or additions that they would like to see.
Dean?
In the second bullet, I just think we need to include not just the criminal legal system, but the community services system. And essentially, we're trying to track people's progress both through the criminal legal and then out of it into a range of community services to assess, how effectively they can be restored to functioning in the community by those services that they're provided in the community.
Tasha?
Kind of building on what Dean just said on the point is to reduce recidivism, but I also think that included in that is recidivism through the services systems where you're always starting back at step 0, similar to you're going back to jail, or you're going, like if you're going, you start the services system and then you're always going back and having to restart the services system. It's not that I'm saying I'm against that, but I think it's a recidivism measure that we have to monitor to show whether there's any true success in those systems.
Thanks. Dan?
Yeah, just real quick. There's a couple of tools. This is speaking to the last bullet point about addressing inequities and discrimination. We've already got a couple of tools in our belt here. One is the GARE toolkit, which I believe that the task force has adopted. So it's government. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna blow the acronym. It's accountability for racial equity, and so we have that already. And then the Vera report, which was done, it's a little bit dated now, but it did come up with some data when it comes to racial inequities within the Whatcom County system. So I think that we've got those two that we could look to. And I know that's kind of granular, and I know we're kind of flying high here, but I just want to make sure that we get those on the table.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, thanks for remembering those. Hannah.
Yeah, I think going off of what Dean said is it'd be really important to make sure that the community service providers are included, and we're gathering data from them as well. I think also I feel like I'm missing the collaboration piece and making sure that the accountability is happening with multiple stakeholders, and kind of just knowing who's doing what and how we can accurately keep track of that and keep people in the room and part of the conversation.
Great.
Amber.
I think this has kind of already been touched on, but in a lot of like, evidence-based articles on recidivism, there's like studies that are done with these offenders outside of here that like can carry on with their life outside of just not going back to jail. So including, yes, the providers, but also like, 3-year, 2-year, they have these marks even not just being re-locked up, right? Like they continue these conversations and collecting data on how they're doing. And just maybe like having that outside of just, did they go back to jail or not? I think Tasha kind of touched on that. But like, how have they been successful marks outside of just reincarceration?
Great.
Stephen?
Thank you. Just a little institutional memory here also, picking up on the thread of evidence-based decision-making and best practices, and tying in with recidivism and the subject of community safety being a measure we want to track. I just want to point out there's a little tension there that maybe we need to talk about and communicate to the public, because as an example, our longstanding drug court, now recovery court, the best practice for that, and we've had a couple mentions throughout here of dealing with low risk offenders. The bigger bang for the buck in the evidence-based stuff, at least in recovery court, is to deal with higher risk offenders who feel they have more at stake, and therefore they engage more in the treatment opportunity. So to the extent that we are so cautious that we only want to deal with low risk offenders, we're not having a very big increment of reduced risk when they were low risk to begin with. And so I think we want, I won't recount the context of the conversations in the stakeholder group that ended up landing on low risk offenders, but I want to point out that that's a topic for us to keep in mind is whether we should be scaling up to some medium and higher risk offenders. We may need to have a shorter leash on those people in oversight, but those are not people that we should exclude from diversion, reentry services, and other alternatives to incarceration. We should tailor services and responses to their needs and their risk levels as well. And we might see some big steps forward as a community.
Point. Dan?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Stephen. I think that we're kind of missing out a little bit on opportunities here, higher risk, but maybe higher reward. And then just last piece real quick, that for that last bullet point, we a lot of us spent a long time developing the Whatcom Racial Equity Commission, and they can be a resource for addressing the things that are that are listed here, these inequities and discrimination within the system. So I think just getting engaged and staying engaged with that group would be a benefit to us.
Yeah, and we're so lucky to have Miriam here as part of this group, as we can do some of that coordination right here. That's great. Hannah.
Yeah, just a quick comment based on what Stephen was saying. I think also noting that the way we're determining low, medium, and high risk is I don't know much about what went into that, but historically it's all like from a correctional standpoint, whereas behavioral health standpoint and how we assess risk is a lot different. And we may say that somebody is a low risk offender if they're connected with the right services versus, a probation officer would classify them as moderate risk or high risk. And so kind of making sure that those assessments align as best as possible, and we have multiple voices speaking to that so that we can get those higher risk offenders who really probably are low risk, and we're supporting them as well.
Okay. And Tasha.
Yeah, I guess the definition of high versus low risk. So when I think of a high risk person involved in the criminal justice system, I'm thinking felony offenders. So if they're already in the they're in the jail, maybe awaiting a trial or whatever, and we can work on getting the trial shorter or the courts that. But if they're going to be going away for 3 to 5 years for robberies or burglaries, I mean, are we counting those in those numbers, or are we gonna, do they get pushed, not pushed, but like, okay, in 4 years they come back into our system so we can start working on the reintegration, but for that they're just kind of on a hold? Or I guess when I think of high low risk, I think of things differently, like in that way.
Yeah, there's definitely some clarification that is going to need to be done around how we actually define these things when we're talking about a metric, being really explicit about what is high risk, what is low risk, and defining that really clearly.
All right. Do we have time for one more? Candace?
I just like really quick, Tasha reminded me of, the people who have maybe felony charges and then they're just suddenly dismissed because these offenders are not restorable. And how are we tracking that? And how are we intervening with supports for them when we think that they're going to prison, but then all of a sudden they're just released to the community with 2 hours notice and we have no supports ready for them?
Yeah. Miriam?
I also wanted to say that the categories look different for different people. So what a felon is looks completely different from one person to the other, in the sense that of how it's socially defined and how it's socially implemented, for lack of a better word. We have felons in positions of power, and then we have felons currently in prison. So how do we define a low risk versus a high risk in that sense? I guess what I'm saying is that I would encourage us to look beyond just the technical definitions and start to see those, categorizations as just that, and just more, I guess, encourage us to look at like human beings. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Jason?
I am muted, sorry. I know we're trying to move on, but just chiming in really quickly on this conversation of risk. As someone who is a therapeutic courts manager for years, I had just sort of assumed that we were using what I consider the standard definition of risk being potential to reoffend, and that being based on, evidence-based assessment tools that are commonly employed in therapeutic court settings. And those tools also make an important distinction between risk and need. So risk being probability to reoffend, need being level of services required in terms of treatment, mental health, substance use disorder, and whatnot. So risk and need are two different categories. And I think it's important to make the distinction between. And when assessing someone for their risk level and probability to reoffend, it's not just a matter of whether someone has committed a felony or not. There's a lot of factors to consider, education level, housing, who they're spending their time with. I've administered hundreds of these assessments before, and it's a pretty thorough examination of someone's overall history and current life, situation to kind of make these determinations. So maybe I don't know, I just been operating under the assumption that that's what we were all talking about this whole time, but now I'm starting to think maybe it wasn't. And I just think that's an important thing to define and a distinction to make between risk level and need level.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank
Boy, we found a couple of really good things too to talk in more depth about. Just looking at the time, Julia, it feels like if we can, it might be good to move to your final slides.
Which is just this last slide, which is on next steps. So going from today, Village Reach, and in this case myself, I will compile, all the feedback that I've gathered on these different definitions of success to, get to a more solid agreement around goals and outcomes for each strategy, which will then, be shared back with you all. And yeah, trying to find a balance between all the different points and how do we get to a state of agreement. And from there, that, once we've agreed upon, okay, this is what we say is success, then we can, start defining measures for how to actually measure success, which we've gotten into some of that nitty gritty here, but there will definitely be further conversations. And so I'll draft some measures for each of the 5 strategies based on everything, that I've heard from you all thus far and other conversations. And then those will be shared with you all in advance of the March meeting, where we will want to solicit feedback and inputs. And then from there, we will, once we have measures defined, then that'll involve meeting with key stakeholders to kind of map those data sources to each of the finalized measures. So these are very high level next steps, but just wanted to give you that understanding of kind of the overall process moving forward. And I just want to thank all of you so much for all of your input so far today. It's been super helpful, and I just really appreciate all of the different views that people are bringing. And I'm looking forward to kind of digging into all of your feedback and moving that forward. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's go then, Marty, if you could pop up the slides, slide of our next steps. So I just want to first say that was such a rich discussion. I really appreciated everybody's insights. So it was really, really useful. For our next meeting on March 20th, as Julia mentioned, she's going to come back and we'll continue the work on the Justice Project Performance Measurement Plan. Also, we'll tap back into the JLBCC design, following up on the jail inmate input, and planning for community outreach. Again, as we mentioned early in the meeting, we're trying to coordinate that with the owner's rep. So that's something that, we'll just do as best we can. In terms of, we got to make sure that we're in coordination there. And then providing any input on the Justice Project website. So we're really trying to dial in that whole system for how we're communicating out to the public and making sure that it's the project and our process is more visible. So that's for our next meeting, March 20th. And now we're going to see, we have this time open for public comment. We just have 2 people here who are technically not members of the JPOP, I believe, but have also been sharing thoughts, and that's been great. So I just wonder if maybe I don't believe we have any people who are not actively participating?
Is there anybody in the conference room? I haven't seen anybody.
Seen anybody? Yeah.
I don't
Okay,
think
well,
so.
Okay.
what I'd like to suggest then is we just take this last, we have 12 minutes left. If maybe we could just go around on anything you'd like to say today in terms of, yeah, your feelings about the meeting, your experience or final thoughts on this process with Julia in Village Reach's process. So maybe we could just hear from everybody on how today went. So I'm going to call on you. Amber, how was today for you? Any final comments?
I enjoyed it. I think I really like that there's so many different people here who have come from different backgrounds. So when I hear people sharing, like they're getting a different lens, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, or it's just a different perspective. And I think that's exactly what this committee was designed. The way it was designed was exactly for that. So I've appreciated that, and it's helping shift my own perspective as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to quickly note, you are more than welcome to give constructive feedback as we're going to be doing additional facilitation activities. So I'm totally open to things that didn't work and you would want to see improved.
Great. Thank you, Julia. Yeah, we're your first group, right? Yeah.
Large,
great.
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Pamela, how about for you?
I just feel like things are kind of coming into focus a little bit better, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the different voices, and yeah, I appreciate the leadership and pointing us in the right direction. So just ready to learn more.
So thank you. Tasha?
I don't know if what Dan brought up with the opioid center, that the opening of that. I had no idea that was going on, and it would have been something that I would have enjoyed going to. And so I don't know if that can be part of the email for if there's something coming up between this meeting and the next meeting related to these things, that there could be like an email sent out that says, hey, because you're involved in this system, here's something related to that system coming up. Because I don't necessarily get all of those bulletins or things.
I'm glad you said that, Tasha. Yeah. If any of you see something and you think, oh, the J-Pop should know about this, please feel free to send it to me and I'll get it out. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Dan, do you want to go?
Yeah. Hey, Tasha, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, it was a tribal thing, so it wasn't really under our, wasn't our event, but we were invited to it. I think it might be helpful for perhaps you and I and maybe some other members of this group to go out to Division and take a look at what they're doing out there. And then they've also got a clinic off of Highway 20 called the Digwalich Clinic, and they do some pretty amazing stuff. And their staff are they're exceptional, and I think that it might be a benefit to some of the members here to if people want to. And I've been down there I don't know how many times now. I just keep bringing people down there because I think it's so it's such good work to prevent people or to treat people with opiate use disorder and prevent future illness and things like that. So what I got from today though, and Tosh, I'll reach out to you and extend that invitation. What I got today though was, Julie, I think that the your guidance and leadership was really awesome, and I appreciate that. What Pamela said about providing some kind of level of more focus is what I was looking for. And I'll keep looking for that when it comes to the work that we do. And I do really think that we need to distinguish the work from the task force to J-pop and just kind of what those lanes look like. So we'll continue to monitor that. But I just really appreciate everyone's presence here today and the contributions, and thank you for all the work that y'all are doing. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Hannah?
Yeah, I think it was really great. I love the different perspectives and people sparking ideas and just having great conversation. I want to bring up, so we don't forget, and maybe it's too early, but we've been wanting to do like an in-person meeting potentially in April. I know Tasha really wants to do that, so I want to make sure that's not forgotten and that we start the conversation as early as possible so that we can get as many people here as possible.
I see a thumbs up from Miriam. When you hear in-person meeting, are the rest of you feeling like thumbs up, or would that be difficult for you? Any comments on that? I'm seeing lots of thumbs. Okay. All right, we'll set that up for April. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dan, I got a sense that other people might want to go on that tour with you. So do you want to just, do you want to see a show of hands, or seeing a thumbs up from Pamela?
Yeah, I mean, if people are wanting to do that, I would definitely welcome it. And we can do like a van or like a shuttle or whatever to get down there, or to get over to Division probably first and then down to Digwal second. But I think it's definitely eye-opening to see what opiate use disorder treatment can look like in a community. And they 70% of the people that go to that clinic are not tribal members. They're just folks from Skagit Island, Whatcom, the whole area here. So yeah, let's get a caravan, if you will, to go down and we can check it out. And I'd welcome everybody on this call to come, and I'll arrange that. So I don't know who's the convener of that, Marty or Holly.
Yeah, I have one little niggling thing, which is that I think we have to stay under a quorum for that. So
Yeah, whatever the rules are, for sure.
Trips.
And we can do it. Yeah, exactly. Holly, 2 trips, but just do it like that, and
Yeah.
then we'll split it
but
up.
I can definitely help with communications, Dan.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be
Hope
great.
set that
And just let me know and I'll make it all happen.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Miriam, you had your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm interested in joining.
Great. And any other thoughts about the session today?
Nope.
Okay, glad you made it. Okay, Stephen, you're up.
Thank you. I have to jump off, so I thought I'd add my thoughts about the session, even from an outsider's perspective.
Please.
I particularly noted the point we made that we can't go from 0 to 100 immediately. And so I would just say that setting those benchmarks or milestones for our outcome measurements, there's often a tendency to set them low so we'll succeed. And I'd like us to shoot for as much as we can bite off at each one of those steps. But I do think there needs to be some sequencing there in our goal setting. The other thing I want to say is I'm experiencing a little confusion as I go over our strategies again, because there's a lot of emphasis on adequate capacity, sufficient funding, and I'm having some confusion around cart and horse stuff, because I don't think we've ever identified or set goals for how many people we want to divert out. What our N, so to speak, in statistical terms is. So I don't know how we could possibly come to a determination of what adequate or what necessary capacity is. And I guess that's a conundrum I would toss in Julia's lap, but I don't know if that's something for us to discuss, or for Dean and Julia to put their heads together on that. But that was something I was wondering as we talked about those goals.
Thank you. Okay, we got about 6 people left and about 4 minutes. So let's see if we can get everybody in here. So Tasha, closing comments?
Kind of building on what Steven said, and I've brought it up before, is we haven't developed a baseline. We've been building all these capacities without building a baseline of where we're moving the starting line all the time because we keep building capacity, but we haven't really developed that starting line very well.
Thank you. Rob?
I think it was, I thought it was a great discussion. I thought it was super helpful to think about other people's perceptions and sort of where they're starting at. I think, as several people have said, it really helps to sort of reset me into just seeing outside of my own view.
Awesome. Thank you. Trevor?
What stood out to me most about today were all the comments and work centered around taking all of these grander views of systems and humanizing them, bringing them down a little bit more to how does it actually show up? How do we actually implement this for the people that we intend to serve? So maintaining that perspective is important to me, and I just appreciate all the different inputs that sort of like work to connect those dots.
Thank you. Dean?
I don't really think I have anything to add to what's already been talked about. I'm just looking forward to keeping the work moving forward.
Thanks, Dean. For those of you who don't know, Dean does a lot of work keeping all these things moving forward. So thank you, Dean. Just really appreciate your work. All right, Stark.
Yeah, I wanted to mention in passing that on Monday, a group of us from the prosecutor's office and our office and the health department are going down to tour King County's competency diversion program in hopes that we could get something like that going up here. So I just wanted to put that out there. As far as today's meeting is concerned, I sometimes have a hard time with these sort of conceptual, wordy kind of things, but I'm really gratified that this community and then this group as a whole have a overall very progressive mindset towards a system that I've worked in now for 38 years and seen very little progress made over that period of time. Frankly, I'm looking forward to the first shovel being dug and the first nails being pounded, and or at least seeing blueprints at some point so that we can get to a little bit more concrete place. But I'm enjoying the discussion at this point.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we've got everybody except Arlene just popped in at the end there. Hi, Arlene. Good to have you here on the tail end of the meeting. You're always welcome. Okay, Marty, do you have anything you want to say as we wrap up? 1 minute to 4. Boom.
Thank you, everybody, for being here and for participating so actively in that discussion. It felt very fruitful.
And Julia, how about for you? You want to say anything now that you're having your lunch?
A snack, yeah. Just echoing what Marty was saying, and once again expressing my gratitude for everyone's comments and participation, and also echoing what everyone was saying about hearing everyone's different perspectives from different parts of the system. It's just really great to get all of that input.
Julia, I'll bring up our Zoom link for our little check-in afterwards. Huh?
Perfect.
Yeah, really such great insights today. I found myself falling in love all over again with this project and how important this work is. So thank you all. Great meeting. Okay, I'll see you in a month. Bye.